of the impersonal Brahman effulgence and Paramatma manifestation. Since he is the origin of the Brahman effulgence and Paramatma manifestation, he is described herewith as the chief personality. It is confirmed in the Katha Upanishad, Nityo Nityanam. There are many eternal living entities, but he, capital H, is the chief maintainer. This is confirmed in Bhagavad Gita also, where Lord Krishna says, Aham sarvasya prabhava. I am the origin of everything, including the Brahman effulgence and Paramatma manifestation. His activities are transcendental, as confirmed in Bhagavad Gita, Janma Karma Chame Divyam. The activities and the appearance and disappearance of the Supreme Personality Godhead are transcendental. They are not to be considered material. Anyone who knows this fact, that the appearance, disappearance, and activities of the Lord are beyond material activities or material conception, is liberated. Yo veti tatvata tyaktva deham punarjanma. Such a person, after quitting his body, does not come back again to this material world, but goes to the Supreme Person. It is confirmed here. Purusha Purusham Rajet. The living entity goes to the Supreme Personality Godhead simply by understanding his transcendental nature and activities. Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare Ram, Hare Ram, Ram Ram, Hare Hare. Text number 37, Canto 3, Chapter 29, Text 37. The time factor, who causes the transformation of the various material manifestations, is another feature of the Supreme Personality of Godhead. Anyone who does not know that time is the same Supreme Personality Godhead is afraid of the time factor. That's a good verse. Purport by Srila Prabhupada. Everyone is afraid of the activities of time, but a devotee who knows that the time factor is another representation or manifestation of the Supreme Personality Godhead has nothing to fear from the influence of time. The phrase Rupa Vedaspadam is very significant. By the influence of time, so many forms are changing. For example, when a child is born, his form is small. But in the course of time, that form changes into a larger form, the body of a boy, and then the body of a young man. Similarly, everything is changed and transformed by the time factor, or by the indirect control of the Supreme Personality of Godhead. Usually, we do not, usually we do not see any difference between the body of a child and the body of a boy or young man, because we know that these changes are due to the action of the time factor. There is cause for fear for a person who does not know how time acts. Interesting. Well, how does time act? Time, it says in this verse today, Canto 3, Chapter 29, verse number 37. time factor, which causes the transformation of various material manifestations, is another feature of the Supreme Personality of Godhead. Anyone who does not know that time is the same Supreme Personality is afraid of the time factor. Interesting verse. Text 38. Lord Vishnu, the Supreme Personality of Godhead, who is the enjoyer of all sacrifices, is the time factor and the master of all masters. He enters everyone's heart. He is the support of everyone, and he causes every being to be annihilated by another. Purport by His Divine Grace, A.C. Bhaktivedanta Swami Prabhupada. Lord Vishnu, the Supreme Personality of Godhead, is clearly described in this passage. He is the supreme enjoyer, and all others are working as his servants. As stated in Chaitanya Charitamrita Harivilas 5.14. Ekale Ishwara Krishna. The only Supreme Lord is Vishnu. Ara Sabha Britya. All others are his servants. Lord Brahma, Lord Shiva, and other demigods are all servants. The same Vishnu enters everyone's heart as Paramatma, and he causes the annihilation of every being through another being. And he causes the annihilation of every being through another being. Okay, that's an interesting statement. He causes the annihilation of every being through another being. Okay.
This whole food chain.
Yeah, one being eating another being, right? Okay, so the text 39. Well, let's see. Let's go back to text 37 for a moment. Everyone is afraid of the activities of time. But a devotee who knows that the time factor is another representation or manifestation of the Supreme Personality of Godhead has nothing to fear from the influence of time. Well, yeah, the devotee knows that I am not this body. So therefore, even though the body is changing all the time, and eventually it will disappear, the devotee is not fearful, knowing that he has an eternal soul. So the time factor definitely is controlling all living entities. But when one knows that the real nature of the soul is eternal, he is not afraid. However, a person, and if the devotee is using his time in the service of Krishna, then he's not afraid. But if a person is just wasting their time having sense gratification, then they become really afraid at the moment of death because they don't know what's going to happen to them. By not knowing what's going to happen in the future, one becomes full of anxiety and fear. But, there was this one Gujarati lady, and she was getting older and older. And then she told her, I think it was her son, and she told him, I'm going to go now, but don't worry. I know where I'm going. I'm going back to Godhead. But you keep following Krishna consciousness as I have, and we'll be together in the spiritual world. So that was she said that with full confidence. So that is the position of a devotee. He's not afraid of death because there is no death for the soul. Yeah, this material body might deteriorate and be no longer functional, but we will get another body when we die, either another material body or a spiritual body. So either way, our existence, it never stops because we are part and parcel of Krishna. Either we'll have a material body or we'll have a spiritual body. But in no circumstance is our existence going to be annihilated. That's why it says here, everyone is afraid of the activities of time. Yeah, because as time goes on, you get older. But a devotee who knows that the time factor is another representation or manifestation of the Supreme Personality of Godhead has nothing to fear from the influence of time. That's a very interesting statement by Prabhupada. Let me read that again. Everyone is afraid of the activities of time, but a devotee who knows that the time factor is another representation or manifestation of the Supreme Personality of Godhead has nothing to fear from the influence of time. The phrase Rupa Vedaspadam is very significant. By the influence of time, so many forms are changing. For example, when a child is born, his form is small. But in the course of time, that form changes into a larger form, the body of a boy, and then the body of a young man. Similarly, everything is changed and transformed by the time factor or by the indirect control of the Supreme Personality of Godhead. Usually, we do not see any difference between the body of a child and the body of a boy or young man because we know that these changes are due to the action of the time factor. There is cause for fear for a person who does not know how time acts. Well, how does time act? It acts by destroying things over time. So, yeah, but all those things that are subject to time or the destruction of time are material, whereas the soul is eternal. Now, some people might understand that, and some people may not understand that. But that's what the truth is. And that's why it says here in this verse, the time factor who causes a transformation of the various material manifestations is another feature of the Supreme Personality of Godhead. Anyone who does not know that time is the same Supreme Personality is afraid of the time factor. A very interesting point. Anyone who does not know that time is the same Supreme Personality is afraid of the time factor. And then in the purport it says, everyone is afraid of the activities of time. But a devotee who knows that the time factor is another representation or manifestation of the Supreme Personality of Godhead has nothing to fear from the influence of time. The phrase Rupa Vedaspadam is very significant. By the influence of time, so many forms are changing. Okay. For example, when a child is born, his form is small, but in the course of time, that form changes into a larger form, the body of a boy, and then the body of a young man. Similarly, everything is changed and transformed by the time factor or by the indirect control of the Supreme Personality of Godhead. Usually, we do not see any difference between the body of a child and the body of a boy or young man because we know that these changes are due to the action of the time factor. There is cause for fear for a person who does not know how time acts. Well, Krishna says, time I am the destroyer of worlds. So the material body is subject to change, and eventually it will disappear. However, the soul is eternal and does not change. So there is Sat and there is Asat. Sat means what is eternal, and Asat means what is not eternal. So our soul is eternal. Our body is not eternal. So therefore, a devotee is not afraid of the changes that take place in the body. Why? Because the first thing we learn in spiritual life is, I am not this body. So what am I? If we identify ourselves as the eternal servant of Krishna and engage in devotional service throughout our life, we're not afraid of the time factor. The time factor is making us change our body. And ultimately, ultimate change is at the moment of death. But it's only a change of body at death. It's not the annihilation of the person. So there's a difference. See, this is the thing that is confusing for people. There's a difference between the body and the soul. The body is subject to the time factor. The soul is not. And if you think about it carefully, you'll see that there's no reason to be afraid of the changes of the body. And the ultimate change is the moment of death. Why? Because your soul is never changing. It never gets old. It never dies. Only the body goes through these changes. Now, is there an example of this? Let's think about that a second. Well, yeah, the consciousness is something that evolves, but is never destroyed. Now you might say, well, when someone dies, they don't talk anymore. Then, you burn the body, or you put the body in a tomb or something like that. But actually, the living entity continues even after the body dies or is destroyed. Now, some people believe that, and some people don't believe that. They think that when you die, that's it, everything is over. But that is false narrative. The body is obviously not eternal, but the soul is. And we can understand this from the Shastras. And it says here, anyone who does not know that time is the same Supreme Personality God is afraid of the time factor. And the purport says, everyone is afraid of the activities of time, but a devotee who knows that the time factor is another representation or manifestation of the Supreme Personality of Godhead has nothing to fear from the influence of time. Now, that's a very important statement. Why? Because people are afraid of getting old. getting sick and dying. But that's not, but the soul is not subject to that process. So here we have a body that's subject to getting old, getting sick, and dying. But our soul is not in any way influenced by that change, those changes. Now, how do we know this? Well, we know it by remembering that in the past I was alive, and I was, I had a small body, and now I have a big body, and it keeps changing, and eventually this big body will disappear also. But the fact that I can remember my previous bodies means that I am not this body. Why? Because I have witnessed all the changes of the body. So you cannot say I am the body. Then what am I? Well, I am the witness of the changes of the body. That means I'm not the body. Otherwise, you wouldn't be able to remember all the changes of the body. So, therefore, if I'm not the body, then what am I? Well, I am the soul and the witness of the changes of the body. Okay, now, how do we understand death? Death is just another change of the body. That's all it is. You go from one body to another body. How do you know that? Well, it's explained in the Shastra. Let's see what it says here. The time factor who causes the transformation of the various material manifestations is another feature of the Supreme Personality of Godhead. Anyone who does not know that time is the same Supreme Personality of Godhead is afraid of the time factor. Purport by Srila Prabhupada. Everyone is afraid of the activities of time. Why? Because over time, everything deteriorates. Right? But a devotee who knows that the time factor is another representation or manifestation of the Supreme Personality of Godhead has nothing to fear from the influence of time. There you are. That's a major statement. The phrase Rupa Vedaspadam is very significant. By the influence of time, so many forms are changing. For example, when a child is born, his form is small. But in the course of time, that form changes into a larger form, the body of a boy, and then the body of a young man. Similarly, everything is changed and transformed by the time factor, or by the indirect control of the Supreme Personality of Godhead. See, that's a very important statement. Why is this body changing? Going from a little baby to an adult to a middle-aged person, and a middle-aged person to an old person, and then finally dying. Why is this happening? And who is controlling it? Obviously, we are not controlling it. We want to control it. So there's so many people that, taking supplements and different types of things. Yeah, there are people that get think that they can increase their lifespan by getting the genitals of a gorilla. Why don't you look that up? It's an interesting point. There are people that actually try and increase their lifespan by getting the genitals of a gorilla or some other type of living entity that they think will prolong their life. But if you understand that the time factor is just another feature of the Supreme Personality of Godhead, then and one is no longer afraid of it. Anyone who does not know that time is the same Supreme Personality of God is afraid of the time factor. But if you know the time factor who causes the transformation of various material manifestations is another feature of the Supreme Personality of Godhead. And therefore it says in a purport, everyone is afraid of the activities of time, but a devotee who knows that the time factor is another representation or a manifestation of the Supreme Personality of Godhead has nothing to fear for the influence of time. The phrase Rupa Vedaspadam is very significant. By the influence of time, so many forms are changing. Did you see anything?
It's not correct.
People get they get the genitals of like a gorilla or something like that, thinking that that will increase their potency and life.
Yeah, somewhere in the early 20th century, experiments of Sergei Uranov, a French surgeon who grafted the testicular tissue from chimpanzees and baboons into humans, claiming it would rejuvenate and extend life.
Right. Exactly.
But it's not anymore.
What?
It was an experiment at that time, but I don't think anybody is doing it now.
You say that, or it's written like that?
It's saying like modern medicine has no evidence to support the notion that animal organs, particularly genitalia, can extend the human lifespan.
Right. Yeah, so they're not doing it anymore.
No.
Well, they're doing other things. They're taking supplements, and they're I don't know. They're okay. Why don't you look at what people are doing to extend their lifespan? What's so Ray Wrightweiler, is it?
Ray Kurzweil.
Huh?
Ray Kurzweil.
Ray Kurzweil, yeah. He's one of these, life extension gurus. And these type of people, they're guaranteeing that at some point human beings will become immortal through nanotechnology or this thing or that thing.
Ray Kurzweil is called the futurist.
Okay.
So there is researchers and scientists such as David Sinclair, a Harvard professor studying aging and genetics. He promotes lifestyle interventions and explores compounds like NAD plus precursors and resveratrol. I don't know what that means, and then there is Aubrey de Grey, a gerontologist who founded the Sense Research Foundation, focusing on reversing aging through regenerative medicine. Then George Church, a geneticist working on CRISPR gene editing technologies to address aging at the cellular level. Then there are biotechnology companies like Altos Labs, backed by prominent investors like Jeff Bezos. Altos Labs focuses on cellular regeneration therapies. Then Calico, the California Life Company, funded by Google. Calico works.
They invested
$1 billion.
$1 billion to stop the aging of a human being. Go ahead.
And they work on understanding the biology of aging and developing interventions.
Interventions,
Yeah,
meaning stopping the aging.
yeah. Then there is another company called Rejuvenate Bio, a company working on gene therapies to combat aging-related diseases.
You see, now all these things are impossible, but yet they get funding, huge amount of funding. The Calico of was invested in by I forget the name of the person, but anyway,
Google.
Google. They invested $1 billion,
Yes, in Calico.
$1 billion to stop aging. Go ahead.
Then, in the category of futurists and biohackers, Ray Kurzweil, a futurist who advocates for using technology, including artificial intelligence and nanotechnology, to extend life. Then there is Dave Asprey, the founder of Bulletproof. Asprey incorporates biohacking techniques like diet optimization, cryotherapy, and supplements to achieve what he calls super longevity.
You know, all this stuff is just nonsense. It doesn't really work. They're all going to die.
And then under the billionaires and philanthropists category, Jeff Bezos, through his investments like Altos Labs, Bezos has shown interest in longevity science. Peter Thiel, a tech billionaire, funding anti-aging research, including the Mitsula Foundation and Sense Research. Larry Ellison, Oracle co-founder, has donated hundreds of $millions to anti-aging research. And then everyday individuals,
Ooh,
like all of us, like many individuals,
yeah.
they use supplements, calorie restriction diets, and intermittent fasting, fitness regimens, high intensity exercise and yoga, technology like wearables to monitor health, optimize longevity strategies. And then other experimental methods like cryonics, senolytics.
Okay, cryonics is very interesting. They freeze the body, and they hope that in the future, when science finds out how to attain immortality, they'll unfreeze the body.
Mhm.
But if you freeze somebody's body, you're going to die. You are dead. But they claim that no, they maintain the life of the body in the frozen state. But as soon as you freeze the body, the person's going to die. Go ahead.
And then
You see how many, well, oh, no, what you should look up is how many people are frozen right now by cryonics. What is the number of people that are actually frozen by cryonics? And they're waiting for, scientists to figure out how to live eternally.
600.
600. Yeah. 600 idiots.
probably extremely rich India.
I mean, yeah, you have to be really stupid to do a thing like that. And by the way, some of those companies that that are in the cryonics business, they went bankrupt, and the electricity was turned off, and the people died. They were all dead anyway already, just by being frozen. But some of those companies went to bankrupt, and therefore they turned off the electricity. The whole thing is a scam.
So there are different ways they are trying to attack. Like they know that in the old age, there's something called dead cells or zombie cells. So there is something called senolytics, where they are having these experimental drugs designed excuse me, to remove the zombie cells that accumulate with age. Then there is another uh, kind of the dimension of the science, stem cell therapy or stem cell research, where they want to use the stem cells to regenerate the tissues and treat age related diseases. Yeah. So it's like different dimensions of hope to fight against the decay of the body. So they're researching on different dimensions.
They're only interested in the body. They're not interested in the soul.
I don't think that they're even aware that there is soul. But they are.
Well, if you start talking about the soul, you get into the realm of spiritual life, right? And they don't like that. They're only interested in the body. You see how people get involved in spending millions and millions of dollars and most of their lifetime trying to do something that is impossible to achieve. Rather than having complete faith in Krishna and using your life to being engaged in devotional service for the Lord, which will lead to immortality, they are trying to find all these scientific ways of increasing the lifetime of the body. In other words, they identify with the body. They don't identify with the soul. Did they mention anything about a soul in their research? No. They're just trying to prolong the life of the body. See, this is like it's the same thing as going to the moon. It's the same thing as trying to find a way to make the body immortal. These are all impossible things, but people and companies are spending billions of dollars trying to do something that is impossible. Like, they've been trying to go to the moon for like 60, 70 years now. They claim that they went to the moon 60 years ago. And now they're trying to go to the moon again. That means they didn't go the first time. If they did go to the moon, then there would already be communities of people, from the Earth that have gone to the moon and started colonies. But the whole thing is a hoax. They never went to the moon, even in the beginning, 60 years ago or 70 years ago. It was a hoax. And that's why they're still trying to go to the moon.
Yeah, many individuals and researchers in the field of life extension focus primarily on the biological and material aspects of the human body, often approaching aging and death as physical problems to be solved. In this scientific and materialistic framework, the concept of the soul is typically not a part of the discussion as it falls outside the scope of empirical science.
Yeah. Something they can't experiment on, they just ignore it. That means they ignore the most important thing. And they just concentrate on what is trivial and temporary. Go ahead.
So there are two perspectives, body versus soul, materialistic perspective. Most longevity researchers such as David Sinclair and companies like Altos Labs operate from a materialist worldview. They view
What?
worldview.
Worldview. Okay.
Yeah. They view human existence as rooted in the body and biology, focusing on extending the body's functionality and lifespan. For these individuals, the idea of the soul is often seen as a philosophical or spiritual matter unrelated to their work.
Yeah, there's scientific nonsense work. Yes. Now you see, there's so many companies trying to do things that are impossible, but as long as they get the funding, they keep trying. And there are billionaires that have a lot of money. They don't know what to do with it, so they waste their money on trying to find ways to prolong the life of the body. The body, at the maximum life of a body, is approximately 100 years. And most people don't even get to 100 years old. Some people go up to 110, 120, 130 years, and then that's it. And that's very rare. So why are they spending so much money to make the body immortal? When by nature, the body is subject to getting old, going through these different phases and eventually dying. So instead of using their time to be Krishna conscious and be engaged in devotional service to the Lord, they're trying to find a way to avoid God or the concept of God and try and become a God by finding a way to become immortal. That is complete nonsense. And they're just wasting people's time and money. But the rich people like Jeff Bezos and others, they're spending millions of dollars. Well, let's say Calico. Calico has invested $1 billion to find out a way of prolonging lifespan. Have they done that? Why don't you look up Calico? Have they actually succeeded in increasing the lifespan of a living entity, of a human being? This has been going on since the beginning of time. Right from the beginning of time, people have been trying to figure out a way to extend the lifespan of the human body. Now, yogis can expand the lifespan of the human body. But, yeah, go ahead.
Calico Life Sciences, the Google's biotech subsidiary, focused on aging and longevity, has made progress in understanding the biology of aging and associated diseases, although it faces challenges in delivering practical results.
Meaning they haven't done anything. I like the way they write things because, basically they're saying, we haven't made any advancement, but we're working on it. Mm-hmm. Yeah. Just as long as the money keeps coming in, they'll keep trying to do something that's impossible. Okay, so our verse today is Canto 3, chapter 29, verse 37. The time factor who causes the transformation of the various material manifestations is another feature of the Supreme Personality of Godhead. Anyone who does not know that time is the same Supreme Personality of Godhead is afraid of the time factor. Purport. Everyone is afraid of the activities of time, but a devotee who knows that the time factor is another representation or manifestation of the Supreme Personality of Godhead has nothing to fear from the influence of time. The phrase rupa vedaspadam is very significant. By the influence of time, so many forms are changed. For example, when a child is born, his form is small. But in the course of time, that form changes into a larger form, the body of a boy, and then the body of a young man. Let's see. Yeah. Similarly, everything is changed and transformed by the time factor or by the indirect control of the Supreme Personality of Godhead. Usually, we do not see any difference between the body of a child and the body of a boy or young man because we know that these changes are due to the action of the time factor. There is cause for fear for a person who does not know how time acts. Well, the first thing we have to learn is that the time factor is another representation or manifestation of the Supreme Personality of Godhead. And once you understand that, there's no reason to have fear from of the influence of time. Why? Well, you're not going to stop the body from aging, but that's the body, that's not the soul. So as long as people don't have knowledge of the soul, they're afraid of the time factor, and therefore they're trying to find a way to extend through different ways the time factor of a living entity. But instead of doing all that waste of money and time, they should use their time to become Krishna conscious and to do good, good things, not impossible things, but things that are achievable, such as attaining eternal life in the spiritual world by using their time in Krishna consciousness, chanting, dancing, feasting, helping other people become Krishna conscious, and so forth. So here we have different concepts of how to use our time. Most people use their time in trying to achieve things that are impossible to achieve. And they're willing to spend billions of dollars to do that. Now, what has science actually done over the years? Well, the best research of science is in war. They know how to kill more people faster. And so they have atomic bombs, they have nuclear bombs, they have this bomb, they have that bomb, they have poison gas, all these things. They're a tremendous amount, spent tremendous amount of money making and stocking them and eventually using them. Right? But those things only kill people faster and more people at one time. Whereas before, when there was caveman, well, he had a rock or he had a club and he could kill a few people. Right? Now they have all these weapons of mass destruction that can kill hundreds and thousands of people at one time. Has society actually advanced from the caveman with his club who could kill one or two or three people, right? Now they can kill hundreds, sometimes thousands of people at one time with all their bombs and things. No, it's the same thing. Whether you're a caveman with a club or you have an atomic bomb, it doesn't really solve the problem of birth, death, old age, and disease. It only increases the ability to kill people faster and in larger numbers. It has not really prolonged life in any way. Now, the people who are involved in prolonging life, they haven't succeeded either. a person still is not going to live much longer than 100 years. So actually, no real substantive advancement has been made by human societies. You're still only going to live maximum 100 years or 110 years or 20 years, but not, you don't go past those times. So no real expense. After all the research that's been done, all the money that's been spent, there's no real advancement. And it's the same thing with space, what do you call it, space exploration. They haven't really made more advancement than like 400 miles. They go up in a rocket for 400 miles, and that's about it. Their space exploration is a hoax. Yeah, they do some things, but they just spend huge amount of money, but don't have too much to show for it, other than a few rocks. Basically, it's a waste of time and money. So rather than improve one's consciousness on the Earth planet, they want to go to other planets. Now, you can't exist on another planet. You don't have a body we don't have bodies that are made to live on the moon or to live on Mars. Right? But yet, that's what they want to do. They want to create colonies on the moon or on Mars. They've been talking about it for years now, 60 years, 70 years. And they're not going to be able to do it. It's just the will of the wisp. It's just nonsense. But yet they're spending billions of dollars to do it. But yet there are people that are starving. There are people that are dying of starvation or diseases or things like that. But they can't stop that. They should try, and so therefore they think if they go to the moon and they establish, a colony on the moon, that's going to be an advancement for humanity. It's not. And they're not going to do it anyway. They talk about it, but they're not going to be able to do it. So where are we? Well, we're studying the Srimad Bhagavatam so that we can actually have real knowledge and not waste our time doing things that are impossible, like going to the moon or increasing the lifespan by different techniques and so forth. The time factor, who causes the transformation of the various material manifestations, is another feature of the Supreme Personality of Godhead. Anyone who does not know that time is the same Supreme Personality of Godhead is afraid of the time factor. Purport: everyone is afraid of the activities of time, but a devotee who knows that the time factor is another representation or manifestation of the Supreme Personality of Godhead has nothing to fear from the influence of time. The phrase Rupa Vedaspadam is very significant. By the influence of time, so many forms are changing. For example, when a child is born, his form is small. But in the course of time, that form changes into a larger form, the body of a boy, and then the body of a young man. Similarly, everything is changed and transformed by the time factor, or by the indirect control of the Supreme Personality of Godhead. Usually, we do not see any difference between the body of a child and the body of a boy or young man, because we know that these changes are due to the action of the time factor. There is cause for fear for a person who does not know how time acts. Well, how does time act? Time, I am the destroyer of all things. That's a statement made by Krishna. So, the time factor is going to destroy things ultimately. So, therefore, should we be afraid of time? No, we shouldn't be afraid of time if we use our time to be Krishna conscious. If we waste our time trying to find a way to make the body immortal, then you should be afraid because you're never going to achieve that goal, and you'll just live in fear as you get older and older and know that you haven't figured out how to extend the life of the body. Everybody's trying to make the body immortal. You don't have to make the body immortal. The body will never become immortal. So that's a useless activity. You are already immortal, but not in the material body. Your soul is immortal, but people ignore the immortality of the soul, and they're trying to make the material body immortal. These are all hopeless goals. They'll never achieve them. But yet they're willing to spend millions and millions of dollars. And why? It's because of sense gratification. They want to have unlimited sense gratification. Therefore, they're trying to find a way to prolong the life of the body. Once you become free of sense gratification, then you're not afraid of getting old. You're not afraid that the body is going to get old and die because you know you have an eternal soul. But let's look at this. Do these big guys talk about the immortality of the soul? Kurt, what's his name?
Ray Kurzweil.
Yeah, Ray Kurzweil. Does he talk about the immortality of the soul? Does he talk about the soul? No, they're all talking about the body. They don't talk about the soul. If they start talking about the soul, then they would try to become devotees.
Scientists working on anti-aging typically focus on biological, biochemical, and genetic mechanisms rather than spiritual or metaphysical concepts like the soul.
Yeah, there you are. So it's a hopeless endeavor and a waste of time and money. They're already immortal. But they're trying to identify with the body that is not immortal. So it is a hopeless endeavor and a waste of time and money. But they have the nice ties and suits and their laboratories and all those things. And they're going to work and they have this big, amount of money. They're making, $1 million a year or hundreds of thousands of dollars. And it's all wasted time and effort. Okay, so are there any questions, comments? So the main statement here is anyone who does not know that time is the same Supreme Personality is afraid of the time factor. And then the purport says, everyone is afraid of the activities of time. But a devotee who knows that the time factor is another representation or manifestation of the Supreme Personality of Godhead has nothing to fear from the influence of time. Nothing to fear from the influence of time.
One question.
Yeah.
Maharaj, the statement that you have just read, nothing to fear, for a neophyte devotee, we know theoretically nothing to fear, but when the actually body is getting old and any part of the body is not working as before, so how to have that same confidence that nothing to fear, as we have understood theoretically, like same confidence, like you gave the example of the old lady, she was dying, and at the time of death she was confident that we will meet in the spiritual world. She was confident,
Yeah.
to the kids. So how to have like that confidence, that
Practice Krishna consciousness. Right? You practice Krishna consciousness, you have complete faith that you have an eternal soul. And, the body is temporary, the soul is eternal. Pretty simple. It's not complicated. You don't have these complicated, equations. Body is temporary, soul is eternal. Therefore, pay attention to your soul. You're not going to be able to make the body eternal. But that's what these people are trying to do. They're trying to make the body eternal. And they're ignoring the soul. Do they talk about the soul? No. They're just talking about the body. That means they're in ignorance. They think they're making scientific advancement. The only thing they're advancing is their salary. That's all. And they're not going to achieve their goal. It's just like a person who spends their time making money. So they end up with a large amount of money, but they're still getting old and they're still dying. I had an uncle who, he had made a certain amount of money, a lot of money, let's say. He had a son who was like an idiot, complete nonsense. So after he died, all the money went to his wife. Then the son pestered his mother, made her life miserable, and then she died very quickly. Now he had all the money. In 3 or 4 months, he spent all that money. It took the father a whole lifetime to make all that money. And the last thing he did was he purchased a racehorse, and the racehorse broke its leg and died. And the last penny he had was, in the racehorse, thinking that, he would make more money, the racehorse winning, contests and things like that. It broke its leg or something and it died, and there was no money left. He did it in like 3, 4, or 5 months after the father died and the mother died. First the father died and she got all the money. Then she died, he got all the money. And 4 or 5, 6 months after he got all the money, finished. And the last thing was the horse, the racehorse he purchased, named it after his mother, and it broke its leg and died. And then he ended up with nothing. So this is what's going to happen also to all these big scientists and all these, spacemen. Right? They're not going to get anything done that's of real substance to humanity. All right, if you go to the moon, does that make you a better person than if you live in Sammamish? No, it doesn't. In fact, you are more precarious. You're risking your life going to the moon, where there's an atmosphere that a human being cannot engage, cannot live in normally. So they have to have, these space suits on and all kinds of things to protect them from the atmosphere of the moon. We can't live on the atmosphere of the moon. So they have to have these spacesuits, they have to have all these chemicals and things like that to exist on the moon. So why would we want to build a let's say a community on the moon when it's such a not conducive to human life? We're made in such a way that we can live on the earth. We don't have the type of body that can live on the moon. So why would we want to go there and build communities on the moon in such a very bad, atmosphere for human beings? It doesn't make sense. But they're promising to build communities on the moon. Of course, they haven't done it yet. And it's very, very plausible that they never actually reached the moon. What do they have to show for it? Is there anything tangible that they have to show for the fact that they went to the moon? Well, they'll say, oh, we do this thing, that thing, but it's nothing practical. All they did was spend a lot of money and made a lot of research, but the results are not there. Why don't you look this up? They'd gone to the moon, they say. And now they're going to go to Mars, they say. But so far, they haven't really shown proof that they did these things. Have they committed? Have they developed a community on the moon or on Mars? No, they haven't. Even though they claim they went to the moon, even though they claim that they're going to go to Mars. They really don't have anything to show for what they're claiming. And who would want to go to Mars and the moon? We would not be able to live there. I mean, we can go to Florida, all right, but we can live in Florida, right? We can breathe the air in Florida, the weather in Florida, and so forth, right? We can go to, be an Eskimo and go to the North Pole. We can still live there. But you go to the moon, you're not going to be able to live there. You have to have this special space suit and this and that. And if there's some mistake made, you'll die very quickly. So it's completely artificial. Moving from Seattle to Florida. Well, you can live in Florida, right? But moving from Seattle to the moon, you would not be able to live there. You'd have to have so many artificial things to protect you from the atmosphere of the moon. So it's a losing affair. It's a losing thing. Let's just make the Earth better and not worry about going to the moon, because you're not going to go anyway, and you're not going to be able to live there. You're not going to be able to build schools and have children and to live on the moon. It's not possible. No. Okay, well, thank you very much. And don't waste your time trying to go to the moon. You can use your time trying to go back to Godhead. That makes sense. But the moon is a losing proposition. So the main statement here is in this verse 37. But a devotee knows that the time factor is another representation or manifestation of Supreme Personality Godhead, has nothing to fear from the influence of time. By the influence of time, so many forms are changing. Okay. Everything is changing and transformed by the time factor or by the indirect control of the Supreme Personality Godhead. Okay. But there's no reason to fear the time factor. Because the time factor is actually Krishna. Okay. But a devotee who knows that the time factor is another representation or manifestation of the Supreme Personality of Godhead has nothing to fear from the influence of time. That's our takeaway today. Haribol. Jai. Okay, any questions? All right, no questions. Then we will adjourn and pick it up again 11 hours from now. Hare Krishna.
Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare. Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare.
We will use our time now to chant Hare Krishna. That means we're using it correctly. Hare Bol.